Hi, this is Denise Mathew, and today I'm going to make these perfectly balanced ear wires. Somebody contacted me and asked me about having a tutorial on how to make these perfectly balanced ear wires, so I didn't even know about them. But in theory, they're supposed to be great for when you're wearing heavy earrings so they don't pull on your ear as much. I had intended only to make the ear wires for the tutorial, but then I saw a technique that I wanted to try out, and so I thought I'd just do it for the tutorial as well. I separated it so it's easy for you to just get the ear wires or the coiled wire, whichever you want. The coiled wire technique is super easy, but it really gives a really nice effect. So stick around for one or two. It's up to you, and let's get started. I'm making two ear wires at the same time just so that you can see how to make them as a pair, but you can make them individually if you prefer. I'm working with a 20 gauge brass wire. You could probably go to a 22 gauge if you wanted. I wouldn't go much lower than that because the ear wires would be too flimsy. So you just need to make a loop on the end of one wire and then just do the same on the other. I use about just over a quarter of an inch of wire to make the loop, but you can always use more or less as you prefer. And just try and make the loops as similar as possible. Because I usually use a pretty malleable wire, I always like to wire harden my ear wire with nylon pliers, where you just pull the wire through the pliers a few times until it gets more stiff. Alternately, you can use a half hard wire. Then you're going to add your coils or also a crystal, whichever you prefer. I'm using a 3mm coil in length I've already made. I'll show you how to do that later on. Then you're going to do a 90-degree angle at the top of the coil or crystal, whatever you're using. Then you're going to measure about a quarter of an inch or 4 to 5 millimeters, starting at where you bent the wire, and you can mark it with a Sharpie so you know exactly where to bend. So now you're going to use that mark to bend your wire about 90 degrees. After you've done your bends, you can bring your ear wires side by side and you can adjust them to make sure that they're perfectly the same. Then you're going to measure 17 to 20 millimeters or about 3/4 of an inch from the second 90-degree angle you made, and you can mark that if you want. And this will be your guide to show you where to start to bend the wire or to curve the wire at the top. Using the mark you made with your Sharpie, you can start to bend the wire around the pen, but you're not going to do a full bend, you're just going to start to curve it a little bit. You can do the both wires at the same time, or you can do one at a time. These ear wires are slightly angled more than this because that's supposed to keep it in your ear better as well. So you're just going to start to use your finger just to make the angle a little bit sharper, like I just did. Then you're going to finish the ends with I have a wire rounder here, but you could also use a jewelry file or even a metal nail file. It's whatever you have. Finishing the ear wires in this way is important so that it doesn't have any catches that will hurt your ear when you put it on. And the last thing you're going to do is just use your pliers to bend up in about a 45-degree angle, about 2 to 3 millimeters on the end, and this will help to put it in your ear. You can measure and mark it, or you can just eyeball it. It's your choice. And that would be your completed ear wires. And here's all the different versions you can do. And if you notice the silver one, it's got a little bit more of an angle. So I did about 6 to 7 millimeters instead of 5 millimeters on the bend. And I also used a 4mm bicone crystal for the other one. I'm using an 18 gauge wire to wrap the coil around, and when I'm using an 18 gauge wire and 1 foot of 26 gauge wire, that will give me 1 inch of coiled wire. This will change based on what size wire you're going to use and what size wire you're going to coil around as well. So I just left about a 1/2 inch tail, and then I wrapped the wire around the bigger wire. Then you're going to wrap that tail wire in. Some people will trim this back. It's whatever you want to do. I like to wrap it in to use it all. When you're first starting the coil, you don't have to worry if the wire is all pushed together as long as it's not overlapping. Once the tail is wrapped in, then you're going to start coiling on the other side, but before you do, you just want to push all those wires together. Then you're going to just keep going down the wire, just coiling around the wire, and you can just do it loosely and then just push the wires together as you go. And you're going to do that until you have the length you want or you run out of wire. When you reach the end, you just want to tuck in that last little bit of wire so there's no sharp parts. And trim anything that's sticking out. I'm working with about 3/4 of a foot of 20 gauge wire and also a 10 millimeter faceted rondelle bead. You can use a bigger wire or a smaller wire. It's really up to you and what fits your bead. So you're just going to do a closed loop. Then you're going to slide on your bead. Then leaving a couple millimeters just below your wrapped loop, you're going to start to wrap around the crystal with the wire. So just go up one side, wrap it around the loop, and then go down the other side. Then right around to the other side that you started on, and then just loop around the wrap loop one more time. Now this is a time when you'd add your coil. Now there's two ways to do it. You can measure ahead so you know exactly how much coil you want, or what I like to do is just put it on and then trim it when it's right on the bead. And you want to make sure that your coil is nice and tight to the wrap loop so that it will go right around the bead. Then you're going to take your wire cutters and just gently press between the coils. You're not actually cutting here because you don't want to cut your main wire. And just kind of wiggle it until you can see where the coil wire is, and then you can just trim that coil wire back without affecting the wire that it's on. And if the wire's sticking out a little bit like it is here, you can just trim that back as well. But again, be very careful of the main wire. And if your coil is slipped out of place, just reposition it exactly the way you want it. You want it right around the bead. And then once it is, then you can take that main wire and just wrap it around the wrap loop area again, maybe about 2 or 3 times to secure it. And then you can adjust it afterwards. Then just trim back the excess wire, and then your charm is completed. Then you're just going to open that ear wire you just made and then slip on your charm, and then that would be your completed earring. And that's all there is to it. I hope you liked it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.